What if I told you that while Europe was stumbling through the Dark Ages, a civilization in Central America was calculating the movements of Venus with accuracy that wouldn't be matched until the invention of modern computers? What if I told you they built massive stone pyramids without metal tools, without the wheel, and without beasts of burden? Yet their structures still stand today while countless modern buildings have crumbled. The Maya weren't just another ancient civilization. They were mathematical geniuses, astronomical wizards, and architectural masters who created one of the most sophisticated societies the world has ever seen. And then they vanished. This is their story.
It's roughly 2000 BCE. In what we now call Guatemala, Belize, and Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, something extraordinary is beginning. While the pyramids of Egypt are already ancient history, a new power is emerging in the dense rainforests of Mesoamerica. But here's what makes the Maya different from every other civilization you've learned about in school. They didn't build their empire in a fertile river valley like the Egyptians along the Nile or the Mesopotamians between the Tigris and Euphrates. They conquered one of the most hostile environments on Earth, a thick jungle where it rains half the year and there's drought the other half, where jaguars prowl and deadly snakes hide in every shadow. And they didn't just survive there, they thrived. The early Maya weren't the pyramid builders we imagine. They started as simple farmers, cultivating maize, beans, and squash in small villages. But around 1000 BCE, something changed. These scattered communities began organizing into something far more complex. By 400 BCE, cities were rising from the jungle floor. Nakbe, El Mirador. These weren't primitive settlements. El Mirador's La Danta Pyramid Complex is one of the largest structures ever built in the ancient world, with a volume greater than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about a structure built entirely by hand, without metal tools, in the middle of a rainforest over 2,000 years ago. But here's where it gets fascinating. Unlike the centralized empires of Rome or China, the Maya never unified under one emperor or king. Instead, they created a network of independent city-states, each ruled by a divine king called a Kuhul Ahol, literally divine lord. These kings weren't just political leaders. They were seen as living gods who could communicate with the supernatural realm. Now pay attention to this because it's going to blow your mind. The Maya developed the only fully developed written system in the pre-Columbian Americas. We're not talking about simple pictograms or basic symbols. This was a complete written language with over 800 distinct glyphs combining phonetic and logographic elements. While medieval Europe was largely illiterate, Mayan scribes were documenting everything from royal genealogies to astronomical observations to mathematical calculations. They wrote on bark paper, carved into stone, and painted on pottery. They recorded their history, their mythology, their science, and their daily lives. And here's the tragic part. Spanish conquistadors and priests burned almost all of it. Today, only 4 Mayan codices survive. 4! Imagine if only 4 books survived from all of European history. That's what we're working with.
Between 250 and 900 CE, that classic period, the Maya reached heights that would make modern city planners jealous. We're talking about cities with populations exceeding 100,000 people. Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, Copán. These weren't just ceremonial centers. They were bustling metropolises with complex water management systems, paved roads, markets, ball courts, and soaring temple pyramids that dominated the skyline. Let me paint you a picture of Tikal at its peak around 700 CE. You're standing at the base of Temple 4, which rises 65 meters into the sky. That's as tall as a 20-story building. The city sprawls across 130 square kilometers, home to perhaps 100,000 souls. Markets bustle with traders selling jade from the highlands, cacao from the coast, obsidian from distant volcanoes, and colorful feathers from exotic birds. Nobles draped in jaguar pelts and jade jewelry parade through plaza ceremonies. Priests wearing elaborate headdresses perform rituals at top pyramid temples. Common people fill the streets, farmers, artisans, merchants, and warriors, all speaking in the musical tones of classic Mayan. Here's something you might find shocking. The Maya played a ball game that was part sport, part religious ritual, and possibly part human sacrifice ceremony. Picture a mix between soccer and basketball, but played on a stone court with sloped walls, and the ball, made of solid rubber, weighed up to 4 kilograms. Players couldn't use their hands or feet. They had to keep the ball in play using their hips, thighs, and upper arms, often wearing protective padding. In some versions of the game, stone rings were mounted high on the walls, and getting the ball through the ring could end the game instantly. But here's the dark twist. In certain ceremonial games, the losing team, or possibly the winning team, historians still debate this, might be sacrificed to the gods. Imagine the psychological pressure of playing the game where the stakes aren't just victory or defeat, but life or death. Now let's talk about something that should make every math student pay attention. The Maya independently invented the concept of zero. Think about that. In Europe, zero wasn't used until it was imported from India via the Islamic world around 1200 CE. The Maya had been using zero for over 1,000 years by then. They developed a vigesimal number system, base 20 instead of our base 10, that was incredibly sophisticated. Using only 3 symbols, a dot for 1, a bar for 5, and a shell for 0, they could represent any number and perform complex calculations. Why does this matter? Because this mathematical prowess allowed them to create calendars of stunning accuracy. The Mayan obsession with time and astronomy borders on the supernatural. They didn't have telescopes, they didn't have precision instruments. Yet, they calculated the length of the solar year as 365.2420 days. Our modern calculation? 365.2422 days. They were off by only 17 seconds per year. They tracked Venus so precisely that their calculations over a 500-year period were accurate to within 2 hours. They predicted solar and lunar eclipses. They identified the Milky Way as a cosmic river of stars and incorporated it into their creation mythology. The Maya used multiple calendars simultaneously. The Tulum was a 260-day sacred calendar for divination and religious ceremonies. The Ha'ab was a 365-day solar calendar for agriculture and daily life. When combined, these created the calendar round, a 52-year cycle. But here's where it gets epic. They also used the long count calendar, which tracked time from a mythological creation date in 3114 BCE. This calendar could measure spans of millions of years. To put this in perspective, medieval Europeans thought the Earth was created around 4000 BCE. The Maya were thinking on geological timescales. Remember the 2012 apocalypse scare? That was based on the end of a long count cycle, a Baktumun, on December 21, 2012. The Maya didn't predict the world would end. They simply marked the completion of a major cycle, much like we celebrated the year 2000. Let's return to their architectural achievements, because they deserve more attention. The Maya built structures that were aligned with astronomical events with incredible precision. El Castillo at Chichen Itza, also called the Temple of Kukulkan, is a masterclass in astronomical architecture. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun creates a shadow pattern on the pyramid stairs that looks exactly like a serpent slithering down the structure. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional design work that required sophisticated understanding of solar movements and geometry. The pyramid has 365 steps, one for each day of the year. Each of the 4 sides has 91 steps, plus the top platform makes 365. The 9 terraces on each side, split by the stairways, create 18 segments, matching the 18 months of the Ha'ab calendar. Think about the planning required. Think about the mathematical precision. Think about the generational commitment to complete these structures without modern tools or equipment. But the Maya weren't just about grand pyramids and astronomical calculations. Let's talk about daily life in a Mayan city. Society was highly stratified. At the top sat the divine king and royal family, believed to have the blood of the gods flowing through their veins. Below them were nobles and priests who controlled religious ceremonies, warfare, and administration. Skilled artisans, sculptors, painters, potters, and weavers occupied a respected middle class. At the bottom were farmers and laborers, the backbone of Mayan society. Mayan beauty standards were unique, to say the least. They practiced cranial deformation, binding infants' heads between boards to create an elongated skull shape considered divine and beautiful. They filed their teeth into points and inlaid them with jade. They induced cross eyes in children by hanging objects between their eyes, as this was considered attractive. Tattoos and scarification marked status and achievements. Their diet was surprisingly sophisticated. Yes, maize was the foundation, so important it featured in their creation myth. But they cultivated dozens of crops, including cacao, which they turned into a bitter ceremonial drink reserved for nobility. They kept stingless bees for honey, hunted deer and peccary, and in coastal areas, exploited rich marine resources.
Here's where we need to shatter a myth. For decades, archaeologists believed the Maya were peaceful astronomers and philosophers, unlike their warlike neighbors. This romantic notion has been completely demolished by modern archaeology. The Maya were absolutely engaged in warfare, frequent, brutal, and systematic warfare. City-states competed for resources, trade routes, and prestige in conflicts that could span decades or even centuries. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul, 2 superpowers of the classic Maya world, played out like an ancient Cold War. These cities didn't just fight each other, they built networks of allies and vassals, manipulating smaller city-states into their spheres of influence. Wars were fought not just between the 2 giants, but by proxy through their allies across the Maya lowlands. Mayan warfare had a specific purpose that distinguished it from European military campaigns. They didn't seek to occupy territory or impose direct rule. Instead, they aimed to capture enemy nobles, especially kings, for ritual sacrifice. The prestige of capturing an enemy ruler and publicly sacrificing him validated the victor's divine right to rule and humiliated the losing city. Imagine the psychological warfare. You're not just fighting for survival or conquest, you're fighting to avoid being dragged back to your enemy's city, displayed before jeering crowds, tortured, and finally sacrificed to top a pyramid as your blood is offered to their gods. Speaking of blood, we need to address one of the most misunderstood aspects of Mayan culture: ritual bloodletting and human sacrifice. The Maya believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create humanity, and humans owed a blood debt in return. Blood was sacred, containing the essence of life force, or chulel. Offering blood maintained cosmic order and ensured the sun would continue to rise, the rains would fall, and crops would grow. Nobles regularly performed auto-sacrifice, bloodletting on themselves.
Kings would pierce their tongues or genitals with stingray spines, drawing blood onto bark paper, which was then burned as an offering. Queens passed thorny ropes through their tongues. These weren't one-time events, but regular religious obligations. Human sacrifice, while real, wasn't as common as Hollywood would have you believe. It was reserved for special occasions, major victories, coronations, important astronomical events. Captive enemy nobles were preferred victims, though slaves and sometimes volunteers were also sacrificed. The methods varied: beheading, heart extraction, arrow sacrifice, or being thrown into cenotes, natural sinkholes. At Chichen Itza's sacred cenote, archaeologists have recovered bones of dozens of sacrificial victims, along with jade, gold, and other precious offerings thrown into the waters. Let's return to something crucial. Literacy and writing weren't universal skills in Mayan society. They were concentrated among the elite, royalty, priests, and specialized scribes. This gave the ruling class enormous power because they controlled the narrative. Mayan writing on monuments primarily served as propaganda. Stelae, tall stone slabs covered in glyphs, were erected to commemorate royal achievements, military victories, and astronomical events. They established genealogies connecting kings to gods and legitimized their rule. When archaeologists finally cracked the Mayan writing system in the 1950s through 1980s, yes, it took that long, a whole new history emerged. Suddenly, the glyphs weren't just decorative. They told stories of specific kings, named real battles, recorded actual dates, and revealed political intrigue that had been hidden for over 1,000 years.
Now we come to one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Why did Maya civilization collapse? Between 800 and 900 CE, something catastrophic happened. One by one, the great cities of the southern Maya lowlands were abandoned. Not destroyed by invaders, not burned by revolution, simply abandoned. In Tikal, construction stopped. The last dated monument was erected in 869 CE, and then silence. Copán's final dated monument appeared in 822 CE. Across the region, elite activities ceased, monumental construction ended, and populations plummeted by up to 90% in some areas. People didn't just move, they disappeared. Millions of people gone. The jungle reclaimed the cities, wrapping pyramid temples in roots and vines, turning grand plazas into forest floors. What could cause such a total societal collapse? Modern research suggests it wasn't one cause, but a perfect storm of interconnected disasters. First, drought. Climatological studies of lake sediments and cave formations reveal that between 800 and 1000 CE, the Maya region experienced the worst drought in thousands of years. Not one drought, but a series of multi-year droughts that devastated agriculture. For a civilization dependent on rain-fed maize cultivation, this was apocalyptic. Crop failures meant starvation. Starvation meant desperation. The divine kings who promised to intercede with the rain gods couldn't deliver. Their legitimacy crumbled. Second, environmental degradation. Population pressure had pushed Mayan agriculture to its limits. They had cleared vast swaths of forest for farmland and to make lime plaster for their buildings, a process requiring enormous amounts of firewood. Deforestation led to soil erosion, reducing agricultural productivity precisely when they needed it most. Third, warfare intensification. As resources became scarce, competition between city-states intensified. The archaeological record shows increasing fortifications and evidence of violence in the decades before collapse. Wars disrupted trade networks and agriculture, creating cascading failures across the system. Fourth, political fragmentation. The elaborate system of divine kingship that had held Maya society together for centuries began to break down. When kings couldn't deliver rain, couldn't ensure harvests, couldn't maintain order, people lost faith. The social contract collapsed. Try to imagine what this collapse looked like on a human level.
You're a farmer in a city that's been your family's home for generations. The rains haven't come for 3 years. Your maize crop has failed again. Your children are hungry. The king's priests promise that more sacrifices will bring rain, but the sacrifices continue and the rain doesn't come. Trade has broken down because neighboring cities are also starving. Warriors raid your fields for whatever crops survived. The elaborate water management systems that used to sustain the city through dry periods are failing without maintenance. Eventually, you make an impossible choice. You abandon everything your ancestors built and migrate away, searching for any place where survival might be possible. But here's the crucial point that often gets lost. Maya civilization didn't completely disappear. The southern lowland cities collapsed, yes, but the northern Maya and the Yucatan Peninsula continued to thrive for centuries more. Chichen Itza rose to prominence after the classic collapse, becoming a major power from 900 to 1200 CE. Later, Mayapan dominated from 1200 to 1450 CE. Coastal trading cities like Tulum flourished into the Spanish conquest period. More importantly, the Maya people themselves never disappeared. They adapted, they moved, they rebuilt on a smaller scale. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, they encountered thriving Mayan communities, not the ruins of a dead civilization. If you made it this far, you're clearly a history lover like me. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next documentary. What lost civilization should we explore next? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.